All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. No game review this week because there was no game. But don't worry, we've got Eric Flack on from WUSA 9 to talk about a whole bunch of things that I think will interest Commanders fans. Eric, first time on the show. We like to get to know you a little bit first before we start diving into the meat and potato things. Investigative journalism seems like a very interesting field. How did you find yourself there?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I honestly, I grew up in the DC area. I went to school out there in Bethesda, Maryland, and went to one of those schools where everybody always asks you what you wanted to do when you grew up. So I got sick of answering the question. I worked for my high school paper. Decided I just answered journalists to get them off my back, and that's ultimately what I did. And when you start out, you kind of do the chasing ambulances, chasing snowplows and stuff like that. But the more I got into it, the more I like to fancy myself a little bit of a Columbo on TV. So I kind of got into the investigative stuff. It also allowed me to kind of control my own schedule a little bit more, which was kind of cool. I had two young kids who are in high school. One's about to go to college now. And so getting into that investigative track lets you kind of come up with your own concepts, come up with your own ideas, not have them assign you the stories they want you to do. You get to kind of tell them what you think is interesting. And here we are, made it back to my hometown of Washington, D.C., going on 8 years ago now. So super excited to be back.
Do you have a favorite story that you've covered?
Are we talking just across the board?
Sure. Whatever.
So favorite is a weird kind of way to describe it. I was at Ground Zero during 9/11. I was on vacation, but kind of shifted into journalist mode there at the Twin Towers in New York. Was reporting for a small market television station in North Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina, at the time. And so kind of hung with the big boys and went side by side with the network journalists as a young 20-something-year-old podunk kid working in small town North Carolina. Also covered an incredible flood hurricane while I was in that same market, and reported from a hurricane, which is kind of unlike anything you've ever seen. And then also to get to report from a 100-year flood where towns are covered in water. And we've seen a lot of that now recently with the weather changes in Asheville. And then from a positive standpoint, right after I got back here in DC, here at WUSA 9, they like to embrace hometown ties. And so as the local sports fanatic news guy, I got to ride in the championship parade for both the Caps on one of the parade buses, and then for the Nats on one of the parade buses. So from a positive standpoint, getting to do those two things, getting to be on the field for Game 7 of the World Series there in Houston and watch the Nats win it in person. Big baseball guy, my son, baseball player. So that was kind of the more positive spin on that question.
I'm trying to think. I'm down here in Carolina Beach. I'm trying to think where Greenville is.
So Greenville is near Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach,
okay.
Lejeune. So Greenville is the market. It's Greenville, New Bern, Washington, and Kingston. I think that's right.
Yeah.
But the market is Greenville, New Bern, Washington, and it's those like triad of cities. And then it's about two hours to Wrightsville Beach, 2 hours to Camp Lejeune, right there near the coastline. I went because I graduated from the University of North Carolina. So, I mean, I didn't really have a lot of options, but it happened to be halfway between the beach and my school. And I wasn't much out of my fraternity at that point anyway.
There you go, 100%.
So it made for a perfect match, yeah.
Eric, real quick, as a local, I'm a Rockville High School grad. I'm kind of curious. Did you go to BCC? Did you go to Whitman? Where did you go to school?
I went to that awful Landon place. I say awful. It's a great place. But I went to Landon out there near.
Okay. Got you. Very cool.
Yeah, graduated. Just 30-year reunion just a couple
weekends
ago. So
congrats.
I'm real proud of Landon and all those
it's cool.
And
yeah.
came around and they get to see me around on TV now, which is kind of fun. So, yeah,
absolutely.
All right, the Commanders back in the news, Eric, for lots of good football stuff, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that before we get up out of here. But obviously, the major news for the fans is around the stadium stuff. It feels like there have been three options, both with particular reasons as to why they may work. There's obviously a lot of land out of Ashburn and other spots that were looked at in Virginia. Obviously, there's a lot of people that want RFK back. And then the organization already owns a lot of land and a stadium out in Maryland. So if you're ranking them amongst the three, if we're giving you 10 chips to put out, where do you put them?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that, I asked that same question one time to somebody who's pretty close to the process. And this was a couple of months ago. So there's been some movement on the RFK front. But at the time, that person who's really close to the process told me he'd rank Maryland one, only because it's actually the easiest. They have the land. They have the support of the government. They have taxpayer money promised to them. They can start building right away. It's the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just building there in Prince George's County. So I would give that 4 chips. Washington, D.C., the RFK site is clearly the emotional favorite. It is clearly at this point the site that the ownership prefers. They have not only said as much as calling it the spiritual home of the team. Josh Harris called that. But, recently, Harris, ownership, Mark Hine, Mitch Rails, were all up on Capitol Hill along with Roger Goodell in separate meetings, all separately kind of dividing and conquering and lobbying as many lawmakers as they can to get this RFK bill passed, with now just a couple of weeks left to go before the session of Congress ends. So, I think that, you don't call Roger Goodell down from New York and traipse him up on Capitol Hill to take meetings on behalf of getting the team the RFK site if there weren't really, really good reason for it. And, as an investigative journalist, sometimes it's enough to just believe your eyes. And when you see, the commissioner in the box there with Harris right next to the mayor of Washington, D.C., high-fiving during that Titans game, it was actually fan video. I didn't see any journalist video. I think it was fan video that had him out there. I mean, that, Carmi. So, you've probably seen that video. So,
absolutely.
I think, those look like people who already have a deal, kind of like, in principle, as they say. The problem is that they don't have the land, as you both well know. And again, some of the same sources I talk to in no way, shape, or form think that getting this land in the next 2 weeks is a foregone conclusion. First, it was the Montana senator who got involved. Now he's out of the way. Now they got to get this bill inserted into a larger spending bill, which is just kind of a mechanics thing up on Capitol Hill, because there's not enough time. So they got to jam it into like a spending bill on, and there's only a couple left, maybe just one, the overall continuing resolution to keep the lights on for the government, called the government spending bill. And right now, the Maryland contingent of Cardin and Van Hollen, sources are telling me, are actually blocking this deal on behalf of Governor Wes Moore. And the overall concern is what's going to happen to the FedEx site, the Northwest Stadium site, if in fact the Commanders leave, and what happens to that critical piece of land, which is in the middle of what's known as the Blue Line corridor out there in Prince George's County, and that's something that they've already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in to kind of revitalize that area. And they always kind of hoped, meaning Maryland leadership and the leaders out there, they kind of hoped that that this new Commander Stadium would be the crown jewel of that entire redevelopment. And you guys have both been around a long time. you know that when they built the stadium out there 25 years ago or whatever, that was supposed to happen back then. They were promised and it never happened. So now they're trying to do it again. And if in fact they lose the stadium, well, not only do they lose the idea of a new stadium, but they now have a huge hole in the middle of this big, huge blue line redevelopment corridor. And what are they going to do with that? And so I think there's just, so when you ask about, why are there not more chips if everybody on ownership side and the mayor of DC, one in Washington, DC, is because I still think even the people I'm talking to don't think it's a guarantee that they're going to get this land approved in the next couple of years. Couple of weeks, excuse me. And then you got Virginia, who probably wants it. And at this point, you might be able to get something out of the legislature now that Dan Snyder is gone. But they just kind of don't seem to be in the conversation. It's more to be. I just don't hear a lot coming. You hear stuff coming out of Virginia. Certainly hear stuff coming out of DC. I just don't hear a lot coming out of Maryland. So I'd give them 2 chips just because they haven't pulled out of the race. So I'd say it's Maryland and DC right now.
What do they do with all that land out of Ashburn, which has got to be incredibly valuable? And as you know, like the facilities they have out there, I'm sure the players prefer to live in Ashburn than say in the heart of DC or something. I get that, but at the same time, the facilities out there are not good. They continue to dump money into it. I guess I've heard they want to keep it out there. There's certainly no room to put a facility like that in DC. Obviously, you could do it in Maryland. What inevitably do you think happens with the property that they have there in Virginia?
I think if you've been out there, and Doug, I don't know if you have.
I have.
They're putting a lot of money into that deal.
They are.
Even throughout the year I've been out there, and they're laying more sod. So the problem is if you watch, y'all watch this Hard Knocks in season, you watch any of those Hard Knocks?
I haven't seen it yet. I know what you're talking about, though.
But, they were showing the Ravens facility just as a comparison right up the road. And it looks like, the FBI headquarters are what they want to build. Like it's a beautiful, huge complex. And, it would take, not as long as a stadium, but it would be a years-long renovation project to create in Ashburn what some of the top teams have going for them. In preseason, we were at the Miami complex, their training complex, beautiful. I think the Jets training complex, beautiful. We don't have anything like that. And I think that you're right. In DC, there's 200 acres, just under 200 acres. And the opponents, who I think are outnumbered, I'm not really worried about the opponents anymore. But the opponents who say, well, we want housing, we have to develop this economically. We can't have something that's just going to be used 10, 12, even with a dome, like 50, 75 times a year. The balance to that, the solution, the cure to that is to put housing there and to put retail there. And if you're going to do housing, retail, and a stadium, like there's no more room there. There's also no more room anywhere else in DC, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
like where would they park in DC?
Well, I think there's still parking lots out there.
Small parking, but not a lot. Yeah.
Not a lot.
I think, when you talk about what DC's contribution, I think is very likely that part of DC's financial contribution would be the infrastructure side, the roads, the bridges, the parking lots, the putting anything but the building, and that's going to be $1 billion. At least to do all that. So listen, RFK back in the day, you guys probably went. I remember going with my dad. The tailgating there was awesome. The experience there was awesome. They also, I can tell you from talking to sources, they already have their plans. Like I haven't seen them, but I know they exist. Josh Harris and his inner circle know what their stadium looks like, no matter where it goes. They have their stadium. They know what it looks like. They also know how big it's going to be, and it's going to be right at that cutoff to get a Super Bowl, which is 65,000 people. You have to be 65,000 or above to get a Super Bowl.
And you have to have a dome to get a Super Bowl too, right?
It's going to have a dome on it.
Gotcha.
It's going to have a dome on it, and it's going to be the cutoff for that Super Bowl number, which is 65,000. That's just common sense these days.
Sure.
All that to say, RFK was it was 55, something like that, mid 50s. So if you're talking about where's all the parking going to go, I mean, there's not that many more people parking there than would be back in the day. Plus, you do have the metro there, and I think DC could do a lot to improve the metro access there as part of their contribution. And people like taking public transportation now. So that's going to, again, kind of alleviate some of the parking situation. So I believe they know how they're going to do it. And going back to the practice facility, is that something you put in Maryland? I don't know. Maybe.
That's what I was going to ask, Eric, if you don't mind me interrupting you. I think the next logical question would be, let's say it falls apart by December 22nd or whatever time frame we have for then. When's going to be the next window to jump back in? That's part of my question there. And my other question would be, let's say they leave for Maryland, right? The team actually owns the property on that FedEx Field in Landover. What happens to that? Are they going to sell that potentially and use it for other things? Maybe put a training facility there, because it's like 10 miles away from DC potentially. It could be a training camp there, but I don't know.
Yeah, Carmi, first question first. There is a real, I don't know that a decision has been made, at least nothing that's been shared with me, but it's a huge decision if they don't get DC, what happens next?
That's like critical. If they miss that,
do they wait another year or not? I don't know that they know. I think they're all figuring this out in real time. And I think from a business standpoint, people like Josh Harris are not used to not getting what they want.
Yeah, for sure.
Is used to not getting not getting what he wants. I think they're focused on making this RFK thing happen, and they'll figure out what comes next down the road if they have to cross that bridge when they come to it, as they say. But that's going to be, if they don't get the RFK site and they're faced with try again another year and push back a stadium another year, which I know they don't want to do it. Yeah. I know they are. You're already looking at 2030.
Okay.
They don't want to go any farther. They don't. I mean, they realize. I mean, you got the Titans game. Look at what happened there. We're still in the playoffs. We had a 3-game losing streak, but I mean, we're still in good shape in the Titans. And that I was not there. I've heard that there were a lot of empty seats at that Titans game.
It was out there.
And that's and that stuff comes back to a stadium and people just saying it's not worth it for me to go. So they know they have a problem there, and I don't know. They know what they're going to do, and that's a big decision. Do you move forward?
Interesting.
And I think if you move forward, because Virginia's a problem, because there's a process there.
I was going to say, isn't Virginia for the most part eliminated? Because I feel like they dropped the ball with the whole Capital One Arena remove with the Wizards and the Capitals, and I think because they extended to that effect and missed out on that, I think they kind of dropped the ball, in my opinion. I don't know. And I feel like they're kind of viewed in that light. Is that true? Or
I was told that Josh Harris is too smart to let himself do
that's true, yeah.
what Leonsis did to himself
Absolutely.
in Virginia. And so I don't think it precludes him from testing the waters and setting up a deal.
Got it.
But to your point, I think if they get off the pot, I'll leave the first part of that out. For our kid listeners, if they get off the pot because they can't do DC, I think they just rebuild the best darn stadium they can do in Northwest. I think because it's the easiest to move forward to. Because if you have to, footsie around with Virginia, why not take another shot at DC? As far as what's going to happen to the land, I know that as part of my reporting last week, when we were talking about Governor Wes Moore being the wizard behind the curtain, blocking the deal by sending, the Maryland senators down there, Cardin and Van Hollen, saying, should you tell Schumer he cannot do this without your approval? And
does it have to be unanimous, by the way, Eric? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Does it have to be unanimous?
No, but Schumer has all the power.
Got it. Okay.
To put the bill in, and he has made it known that he's not going to roll his Democrats over this.
Got it.
He'll roll some Democrats over other stuff. He's
Like,
not
yeah.
going to roll Democrats over an issue that nobody outside of Washington, D.C. cares about or honestly even knows about. Like we got to put it into perspective.
Yeah.
Outside of the DMV and North Carolina, where we have a lot of fans, people aren't paying it. Nobody knows anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
And Schumer's not going to roll Democrats and go against, his own party over a stadium for Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been told from the team, and I think there's only so much I can say about this part, but they do have plans, right? They do have plans for what would come of FedEx Northwest land and out in PG County in Landover. And they have no intention of leaving it bare and
barren. Yeah.
Leaving Prince George's County in Maryland to hold the bag. They own the land. They're not going to be absentee landlords. They don't intend to. Now, I've been told that, Governor Moore wants assurances. What assurances look like, maybe the holdup here. I mean, in their eyes, I think in the team's eyes, we're 5 years before we even leave, even if we leave. Mm-hmm. So plenty of time to
figure it out. Yeah.
Figure it out. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you this, they do have a vision, a very specific vision for what it could be. They're not going to force their will, but they have an idea on what they could do there. But obviously it's not enough, at least at this point when we're sitting here talking at this moment, to satisfy the leadership there in Maryland.
Will the new folks coming into government this January, will that affect this at all?
So whenever the clock strikes midnight on this session here in December, so I think it's like the 22nd, it's a couple days before Christmas, and all these politicians want to get home to their families. Then this congressional year ends. Everything that they've talked about that has not been passed into law becomes etch-a-sketch. You just shake the whole deal and you start over. So you come back in, yes, you're going to come back in with a bunch of Republicans that are kind of running the House and the Senate. That could be a double-edged sword. I mean, everything down is up right now. I mean, before, Republicans were anti-DC and Democrats were pro-statehood. Then we get to a stadium deal, and it seems like the Republicans are the ones who are fine with it and have been. Even Speaker Johnson over in the House says he's fine with this, and it's the Democrats who are holding the deal up. Same thing next year. You got a bunch of Republicans running the deal. You think it would be fine. But the committee that this bill has to come through, the one that the senator from Montana held it up in, which is the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the guy who's going to be the majority chair because the Republicans are in control is Senator Lee from Utah, who was one of the only people who voted against the deal to come out of committee for his own ideal
politics, man.
Yeah, politics. He said, well, DC shouldn't get land for free. They should have to pay market rate for the land. Mm-hmm. So would he kind of hold it up then, even though his party's in favor of it, but he runs the committee that would have to get it out, the whole thing that happened with Daines, could that muck it up again? And I think that's what kind of gives the commanders pause. So I guess, Doug, the question is, is this going to be, would it just be easier next year? I don't think you can say that. I don't think anybody from a political handicapping standpoint really has any idea.
Will they ever get statehood?
No. God.
Never.
You think about Republicans they don't care about the congressional vote. It's the 2 Senate votes. You give these 700, there's there's 1.2 million people in DC, this small amount of people, you're going to give them 2 votes out of 100, make it 102. I mean, if they did it, you'd come in with Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico would be a state, DC would be a state. There'd be 2 Democrats and two Republican votes. Puerto Rico is pretty Republican.
I know that.
So they would come in together.
That's a misnomer, right? I think the average person thinks Puerto Rico would vote Democratic, but that's not it at all.
They did not after the whole deal. Not to delve into politics, but after Puerto Rico got thrust onto the map at the end of the last election, and people thought the Republican candidate was, and the people around him were talking bad about Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans came out strongly in favor of Donald Trump.
You mentioned the stadium earlier, and they've already got the designs for it. You mentioned that it would have a dome. Is there any point in getting it in doing a retractable dome, or is that a waste of money?
I don't know. I don't see retractable domes as a huge draw when you are talking about money. I mean, these stadiums run up to like $4 or $5 billion right now, and there is going to be a financial cap. Josh Harris is building a privately funded new basketball arena
Sixers team. So I thought,
for the Sixers, and he's taking no taxpayer money for that. So, and they're different ownership groups, but like even for billionaires, the money runs out at some point, unless you're Steve Cohen. If you're Steve Cohen in the Mets, the money never runs out. For most average billionaires like Josh Harris, the money does run out, and so I don't know. Is a retractable roof definitely not in the cards, but I know that again, if the goal is a Super Bowl, and it is, probably just having that, and the roof is something you're going to need in February in Washington D.C. Then I think you're probably looking at a regular roof, but maybe
real quick, George. Let me get one follow up in here. I know this is putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but Eric, I was hoping you would explain to the listeners who may not be familiar with PSLs exactly what's coming with a new stadium, because it's kind of brutal.
Yeah, and you talk to season ticket holders and they know it's coming. And a lot of blue collar season ticket holders, it's funny, are the people who are the least like feverish about the new stadium because they know what comes with it. I remember having a conversation about a year ago with Tailgate Ted, and he's like, I'm not going to be able to afford the permanent seat, the PSL, the permanent seat license for a new stadium. So, I don't even know what they're up to. They're tens of thousands of dollars, depending on where you go, to buy a seat, to just have the right to buy seats. There was one study that was already done by the commission by DC government, and they very much envisioned luxury areas. And I don't know if you saw what was going on with the Arizona Cardinals revamp of their stadium, or what I think the Raiders are doing this too, where you have like lounges literally in the end zone and on the field, and like all sorts of different.
I saw that actually. I've seen that.
Structures like you have never seen. I mean, these are not like seats with leather kickback recliners. I mean, these are like
waitresses. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cabanas. Yeah,
cabanas. Things they do at like baseball stadiums, like the pool out at the Diamondbacks, right? Are the ones who have the pool out there.
Yeah, Florida Marlins, I think too.
Oh, Marlins, right? It's concepts like that, and those are very much, I think, of what the vision is. From people who see what a stadium is going to be like in by the time the Commanders finally get to do that, because that's where the money is made. That's where the corporate dollars come from.
Absolutely.
They don't make their big bucks on people like us. They make their big bucks on major DC, corporations that are going to buy up the luxury boxes, that can take the politicians there, that can take the movers and shakers there, that can close deals there. I mean, they're used as bargaining chips. When Jeff Bezos is going to have box there where he cuts his deals with, whatever Space Odyssey he's working on, things of that like that. So, so the permanency licenses are huge amounts of money that are going to price out everyday fans. No question, absolutely no questions asked. It's just a reality.
Exactly. I'm a primary source right here. I'm the ticket holder. I have row 3 seats right next to Chris Bryant and Keith Gray. I'm right there up the front with the Hog
you're
Farmers.
next to a Hog Farmer. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in 109, section 3, so I'm definitely, I love it there. I know for a fact whenever we get to our 2030 in this new stadium, I'm a teacher, so it's like I have a certain threshold of money I can pay. I don't see it happening when I get this PSL to this new stadium, so I'm definitely discouraged by that.
And you don't have, and there's no PSL right now.
There's no PSL right now, which is it's pretty reasonable. It's actually pretty. I pay about $3,000 for me and my wife to go, and we're sitting in row 3. And I think we bought low because the Commanders weren't necessarily appealing for many years. So we actually got a pretty good deal. But I think eventually we will be priced out there, which I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about like FedEx is. For the lack of a great structure, it actually has a pretty good layout in regard to like the parking lot. The tailgating scene is actually pretty fun there, and I know that when we go to RFK, we might actually lose out on the tailgating scene. So I'm concerned about that.
Well, you're not going to have if there's one thing that FedEx has going for it,
is the sprawling land.
Of space.
Yeah, a lot of space.
Got a lot of land out there.
Exactly right. Going back to my question, though, this is just for me. I'm just curious about that. You talked about funding and Josh Harris buying the Sixers stadium and privately paying for that. How does that work in regard to the ownership group? Like, is it fair to assume all of the Commanders owners are also buying the stadium or pitching into the stadium as well, like Magic and Ein and Mitchell Rails?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is a group deal.
Okay.
No doubt about it. And I think most likely when the owners were brought into the group, I think, it was likely made clear to them that we are building a new stadium, that you're building into a team that is ultimately going to be building a new stadium. And whether or not that was part of their original buy-in or whether there was going to be a, what's known in the financial markets as like a margin call, right? Or if you live in a condo, you get an assessment when a hurricane comes through. To repair everything. So whether there's going to be a margin call, an assessment on these owners based on what percentage they are. But I remember at one point our sports director Chick Hernandez did ask Josh Harris about whether or not he was going to privately fund it, and he said, well, because what he was doing in Philly, and he said, well, football stadiums are more expensive than basketball stadiums, which they are.
Size-wise too, yeah.
But he did use the terms. He said, but my owners and I are very fortunate. So he wasn't just talking about me. He talked about he and his owners collective that we are fortunate to all be in a good financial position. And so I would think, at some point they're going to be passing around the hat. For sure.
Makes sense.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? My internet went all crazy there. Eric, I was curious. You mentioned, we've been using the word commander, and you mentioned earlier about all this comes down to money, and it does. I'm curious if you have sources that are saying whether they find the name to be profitable from places that they really care about it being profitable. If you understand what I'm saying, like getting a hospital deal and getting some of these other deals. More important, where do the Commanders' name stand with those kind of folks?
Yeah, I think that winning sells. I think that you hear a lot more of the grassroots protesting of the loss of the name Redskins and the Redskins logo than you do from a corporate standpoint.
I can see that. I
think if you're, from a corporate standpoint, no matter how you feel about woke or not woke or anything like that, are you really gonna say I'm not gonna advertise because the name's Commanders instead of Redskins? So when you're talking about from a corporate standpoint, I don't think that it's gonna cost them any money from the big picture, because I think those are the people that you're probably, if anything, still trying to not
absolutely,
or
yeah.
you just don't even want it to be an issue
Mm-hmm.
or a conversation
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to being in the boardroom trying to get them to write a 6 or 7 or 8 figure check to sponsor a naming, a stadium, a practice facility segment, or anything else like that. So I don't necessarily know that it's going to hurt them on a corporate level or anything like that.
Do you know if it's attached to anything with the Bills by any chance, or not really? I don't think so.
No,
Right?
I mean, it's Daines, the Montana senator who was holding this deal up, was trying to attach it to the logo, not the name, but he was trying to attach it to the logo, demanding some sort of concessions from the team as far as bringing back or honoring the logo, and until he got insurances on that front, he was unwilling to advance the bill. Now, the team made a lot of effort with the family there from Montana, where the old Native American logo came from. They got the support of the family. They honored the dude's grandfather there, Wetzel. And now if you go up in the
club suites,
there's that area there. But he was trying to make it an issue, but I think that has passed, and now it's just kind of more into the politics of the land itself.
Gotcha. So let's kind of bring some closure. In a couple minutes, I'm going to give other things to do as well to kind of bring us some conversation. Well, I have one more question for you. Yeah. So off the field, going back to the actual on the field gameplay, how exciting has the season been for you? Are you a big Commanders fan? Like, what surprised you all together? Like, how do you feel about Jaden Daniels, the team, the playoff chances? What are your thoughts all together on the team?
I mean, I'm a diehard fan. I've been a fan since I've been a little kid. I was, if I can do some quick math, I was 7 for the first Super Bowl. So we won the 3 Super Bowls when I was like at the height of like adolescent sports fandom from ages 7 to 12.
It's impressionable at that point. 100%.
I was spoiled because then we started losing games, and I thought you just won. I was like an old era Patriots fan. I was
exactly right.
Went to
We're
the
supposed
championship.
to do this.
Yeah, I thought you went to the championship or Super Bowl every year. I didn't think the turnaround was going to be this quick. It has been wildly exciting. I was at the Bears game. That was kind of
amazing.
I think there has been a bit of a regression, which has been understandable. It was encouraging to see them beat up on the Titans. I think after the Cowboys debacle, there was a concern that they were really exposed. And I think after they beat up on the Titans, I think that reminded you this is actually a good team that's going to beat up on really bad teams. Not to date this, hopefully, nobody will be, listening to this after December 15th. And I'd be wrong, but I think we're going to beat up on the Saints.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So depleted.
And Derek Carr got injured recently, too. I don't know if you caught that. He broke his hand or fractured hand yesterday.
Yeah,
so he's out.
At the point you're talking about, we would be to 10 wins at that point with, 2 out of 3 games left to go against not very good teams. I mean, not making the playoffs at that point seems, I hate to say it, unlikely, which is and I think, we roll into the playoffs likely as the 7th, maybe the 6th seed, but we probably roll into the playoffs the way the NFC Central is, or North. Is it called the North? The NFC North is
the North,
teams are there. We probably end up playing whoever's not the number 1 seed. The Lions in Detroit, the Eagles in Philly. That's kind of a tall.
Do you have a preference? Yeah, at the tall task. Do you have a preference on who we play?
I'd probably go Lions in Detroit because I think.
Wow.
But I think Jaden Daniels will play better in a dome than he'll play in Philadelphia in January, December.
Yeah, it's true.
I think the Jaden Daniels factor, I think you put him on a carpet in 65-degree temperatures, I think he has a much more likely to be Jaden Daniels, like the superstar indoors.
Exactly right.
And I don't know whether they win, but could he make it fun? Could he keep him hanging around? Sure. Yeah. What do you think?
I think the same thing. I'm excited about it. Parts of me wants Washington to play the Eagles to kind of send a message because that the old division rivalry it'd be great to knock them out of the playoffs. But the Eagles look so damn good. They're so well rounded. Their offense is so strong. Saquon Barkley will eventually break us down. I think he has a great run game there. Detroit, that'll be a fun game. But the thing is, I'm rooting for Detroit. Actually, if it's not going to be us, like I feel I empathize with the Detroit Lions because their fan base has been down so long, their team has been down so long. I think they can actually beat the Eagles. I don't want to necessarily play them, but I'm excited. It's been a great year altogether. Jane Dina surprised me. I thought he was going to be good, not to this extent. I'm really impressed by this. This is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to a good year. Like my goal is I want Washington to get 11 wins. I think the last time we reached 11 wins was back in 1991. We won that 14-2 with that Super Bowl year. So I would love to get to that point. I think we're the only team in the NFL that hasn't had 11 wins since then. So I want to get to that point. So that'll be great. And it's been a good year. So I'm excited about that.
I agree. I think 11 is a good number. And I think it's doable. I think it's doable.
Cool. All right, Eric, I appreciate the conversation. I think Doug's lost in translation now. He'll definitely DM you, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Some great information there, and hopefully get a little Christmas gift with this whole stadium talk. I think it's going to happen. I'm pretty confident. Like I don't know, what are your are you pretty confident it's going to happen by December, or do you think it's going to be shelved to next year?
I don't know. I'm going to say I'm going to say it's going to happen. I just think. I don't know. I don't think the NFL is not going to get its way. I think I've also seen the Commanders do whatever they need to get this deal done. And if they have to cut an 11th hour like deal with West behind closed doors, I just have a sense that they get it done. Whether that means guarantees for the site out there in Prince George's County or what, written in stone, I don't know. But I have a sense they get this done. I've always kind of said that I think they come back to DC. It's a
collective power swing move for them, right? I feel like the ownership already has high approval ratings. If they land a stadium in DC, they're going to be like, untouchable for many, many years. So I'm pretty, that's how I feel to be. So perfect. All right, Eric, have a great evening.
I appreciate the invite.
Thank you for coming on. I really come back anytime. You're more than welcome to.
All right. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
All right.